They say you should keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But standing in a dark alley with my blood on the pavement, I realized I had it all wrong. I didn't need to keep Cassian Draken close. He was already there. He's been watching me from the shadows for years, and he's not letting me go until I'm his. The rain in this city doesn't just fall, it drowns. I stood in the shadow of an alleyway, my breath hitching in the cold air as I adjusted the wire under my jacket. For 3 years, I've had one name burned into my brain: Cassian Draken. He's not just a criminal, he's an architect of chaos. Every time I think I have him cornered, he slips through my fingers like smoke. He's the man who owns the skyline, yet lives in the shadows. My bosses think he's a myth. I know he's a monster. "Sterling, pull back. The signal is dying." My partner's voice crackled in my ear. "Not yet. I have his lead courier in sight." But I was wrong. I wasn't the hunter tonight. I was the bait. Before I could move, 3 men stepped out of the darkness. No badges, no questions, just the cold gleam of steel and the heavy thud of a lead pipe against my ribs. I hit the wet pavement, my vision blurring into a kaleidoscope of gray and red. They didn't want information. They wanted a message. "Finish it," one of them growled. I closed my eyes, waiting for the final blow. It never came. Instead, the sound of a high-performance engine screamed through the alley. A black sedan skidded to a halt, and the world went silent. I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, and heavy. Then, the sound of bodies hitting the ground. "You're late," a voice rumbled. It was deep, like the vibration of a cello, smooth but dangerous. I looked up, squinting to the blood. Standing over me was the man I had spent my entire career trying to ruin, Cassian Draken. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was in a tailored black overcoat, looking like a king who had just found a stray dog. "Draken," I coughed, tasting copper. "You're under arrest." He let out a short, dry chuckle and knelt beside me. He didn't touch me, but his presence was a physical weight. "Always the Boy Scout kit, even when you're bleeding out on the street I own." He reached out, his gloved hand gripping my chin, forcing me to look at him. His eyes were dark, swirling with something I couldn't identify. Anger? Or was it something more terrifying? "The men who did this aren't mine," Cassian said, his voice dropping to a low snarl. "And because they touched what belongs to me, they won't see tomorrow. As for you, you're coming with me." "I'd rather die," I bit out. "Careful, Sterling," he whispered, leaning closer until I could smell his scent, expensive leather and cold winter air. "I might just let you, but then who would be left to chase me?" Everything went black. I woke up in a room that cost more than my apartment building. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, overlooking a cliffside where the ocean roared below. No bars, no handcuffs, just a massive king-sized bed and the hum of a high-tech security system. "You're awake." Cassian was standing by the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He had shed his coat, his black shirt stretched tight across broad shoulders. He looked like a protective alpha male surveying his territory, and I realized with a jolt of fear that I was now part of that territory. "Where am I?" I demanded, trying to sit up. My ribs screamed in protest. "A safe house. My private estate," Cassian said, turning around. He walked toward me with a predatory grace that made my heart hammer against my chest. "The people who tried to kill you tonight won't stop. They think you have my ledger. They think you're the key to my empire." "I am the key," I snapped. "I have enough on you to—" "You have nothing," Cassian interrupted, stopping at the edge of the bed. He leaned over me, his shadow falling across my face. You have 3 years of obsession, Kit. You've spent more time looking at my photos than looking at your own reflection. You're not here as my prisoner. Then let me go. Cassian reached out, his thumb grazing the bandage on my forehead. His touch was unexpectedly soft, a jarring contrast to the coldness in his eyes. I can't do that, because as much as you want to put me behind bars, I have a much darker obsession. I want you right here, under my protection, under my eyes, until I decide I'm done with you. I looked into his eyes and realized the truth. The rivalry wasn't just work. For Cassian Draken, it was a hunt, and he had finally caught his prize. 3 days. I had been trapped in Cassian's glass fortress for 3 days, and the silence was starting to scream. My ribs were healing, but my mind was unraveling. Every time I looked out those floor-to-ceiling windows at the crashing waves below, I felt less like an investigator and more like a ghost. Cassian was everywhere and nowhere. I'd wake up to find a tray of food, exactly what I liked, down to the brand of black tea, but he'd be gone. Then, at night, I'd catch him in the library, the glow of a single lamp casting long, predatory shadows against the walls. "You're staring again, Kit." His voice cut through the dark. He didn't look up from his tablet. "I'm observing a suspect," I countered, my voice raspy from disuse. I walked into the room, my bare feet silent on the cold marble. "Why am I still here, Cassian? If the threat is so great, why haven't I heard a single siren? Why hasn't my department found me?" Cassian finally looked up. He set the tablet down and leaned back, his eyes tracking my movement with a hunger that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Because your department thinks you're a traitor, Kit. I leaked a few files, just enough to make it look like you went to ground with my ledger." I froze. "You ruined me." "I saved you," he corrected, standing up. He moved toward me, and instinctively I backed away until I hit a bookshelf. He didn't stop until he was inches from me. "Here, you're safe. Here, you're mine." "I am not your property," I shouted, shoving his chest. It was like hitting a wall of solid granite. Cassian grabbed my wrists, pinning them against the shelf on either side of my head. His face was so close I could feel the heat radiating off him. "Aren't you? You've spent 3 years obsessed with me. You know my bank accounts, my aliases, my favorite vintage of wine. You've let me live in your head until there's no room for anyone else. Tell me, Kit, who belongs to who?" My heart was thundering, a wild animal trapped in my chest. "I hate you." "Liar," he whispered. His gaze dropped to my lips, and for a second, the mask of the cold businessman slipped. I saw the protective alpha male underneath, the man who didn't just want to win, he wanted to consume. "You don't hate me. You're terrified because I'm the only person in the world who actually sees you. Not the badge, not the sterling name, just you." He let go of my wrists, but he didn't move away. Instead, he reached out and traced the line of my jaw with a calloused thumb. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through me that I couldn't fight. My eyes fluttered shut, a small, traitorous sound escaping my throat. "There it is," Cassian growled, his voice thick with satisfaction. "The truth." Suddenly, the house's red emergency lights began to pulse. A low siren hummed through the walls. Cassian's entire demeanor changed in an instant. He grabbed a concealed handgun from the bookshelf and shoved me behind him. "Stay down," he commanded. "What is it?" "The people I took you from," Cassian said, his eyes scanning the security monitors that flickered to life on the wall. "They found us. It seems your old partners are more persistent than I thought, or someone sold us out." I looked at the screen. 4 black SUVs were carrying up the private drive. These weren't cops, they were mercenaries. Cassian turned to me, his hand gripping the back of my neck. He pulled me forward until our foreheads touched. "I'm going to end this, but if anything happens, there's a boat at the docks. Use the code 0922. It's the date of the first time you tried to arrest me. Cassian, go, he roared. As he ran toward the foyer, I stood there, paralyzed. He had used the date I tried to arrest him as his security code. He had been thinking about me as much as I'd been thinking about him. This wasn't just a dark obsession, it was a death wish. I didn't go to the docks. I grabbed a heavy glass decanter from the bar and followed him. If I was going down, I wasn't going down running. I was going down with the man I was supposed to hate.
The glass mansion shattered. It wasn't a metaphor anymore. The front windows exploded inward as the first wave of mercenaries breached the foyer. I saw Cassian move with a lethal, fluid grace I'd only ever seen in training videos. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a storm. He took down the first two men before they could even level their weapons. But there were too many of them. "I told you to go to the docks," Cassian roared over the gunfire, his voice raw. "I'm an investigator, Cassian. I don't run from the fight," I yelled back. I swung the heavy crystal decanter, catching a mercenary across the temple as he tried to flank Cassian. The man crumpled, and I dove for his sidearm. For the next 10 minutes, the house I had viewed as a prison became our fortress. We moved in a perfect, unspoken symmetry. Every time I moved left, he covered my right. It was as if our 3 years of cat and mouse had prepared us for this exact moment. We didn't need words. We knew each other's rhythms better than our own. As the last of the intruders fell, a heavy silence settled over the ruined living room. The red emergency lights were still pulsing, painting the white marble in the color of blood. I looked at Cassian. His shirt was torn, and a thin line of red ran down his temple, but he looked exhilarated. He dropped his weapon and walked toward me, his chest heaving. "You stayed," he breathed, his dark eyes searching mine.
"I couldn't leave you," I admitted, the weight of the truth finally breaking my pride. "I've spent 3 years trying to catch you, Cassian. If you die, I have nothing left to chase." Cassian didn't wait. He grabbed the lapels of my tactical jacket and pulled me into a kiss that tasted of adrenaline and desperation. It was the final surrender. All the walls, the badges, the laws, they all burned away in that one moment. I didn't care that he was my rival. I didn't care that I was supposed to be the good guy. He pulled back just an inch, his forehead resting against mine. "I'm not letting you go back to that life, Kit. They'll never trust you again." "I know. So what do we do?" Cassian's smirk, that dangerous billionaire alpha glint returning to his eyes. "We go to the docks, we take the boat, and we disappear until the world forgets Kit Sterling ever existed." 1 year later. The sun was setting over the Mediterranean, turning the water into liquid gold. I sat on the deck of a sleek white yacht, a tablet in my hand. I was looking at the news from back home. The Kit Sterling case had been closed months ago, listed as missing, presumed dead. A pair of strong arms wrapped around my waist from behind, and the familiar scent of expensive leather and sea salt filled my lungs. Cassian pressed a kiss to the top of my head. "Still checking up on your old life, Sterling?" he teased, his voice vibrating against my back. I turned in his arms, looping my hands around his neck. He looked relaxed, his dark hair windswept, wearing a simple linen shirt. "Just making sure they haven't found a new ghost to chase." Cassian pulled me closer, his grip possessive and warm. "They won't. I made sure of that. Besides, I have the only investigator I ever cared about right here." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, heavy object. It was my old badge, polished and gleaming. "I kept this," Cassian said, his voice turning serious, "to remind me of the man who was brave enough to try and take me down, and the man who was brave enough to stay." I looked at the badge, then up at the man I had once called my enemy. The rivalry was over, but the obsession, That was just beginning. "I love you, Cassian," I whispered. "I know," he replied, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across his face. As he leaned down to kiss me, the yacht sailed further into the horizon. I wasn't an investigator anymore, and he wasn't a criminal. We were just two men who had found a home in the one place we never thought to look, each other's arms. And that is how Julian and Kit's story ends, from rivals to soulmates. If this story touched your heart, please help us hit our 1,000 subscribers goal so we can keep creating these worlds. We are so close to the 4,000 watch hours mark, and every minute you watch helps Gay Stories Chronicles grow. Thank you for being part of this journey.